Good afternoon, everybody. Will, I'm trying to promote you to a panelist. It's not letting me. Oh, there it goes. I guess it finally took. All right, let me pull up our pre-submitted questions here. All right. All right, Chris, I see here. I'm going to put your question in the chat, and I'm going to allow you to talk. We use an entity for form input and then select the fields of said entity for several controls on the form. An active form flow can access the content of each control, but only one at a time, not as an entity as with form output. Or did I miss a step? You're trying, walk me through the use case a little bit here. You've got like you're passing an account into a form.
Right.
You're breaking the properties of that account up into text boxes and drop downs.
Right.
Right. And then you're having active form flow, like set values in other controls for the selected account.
So the basic idea would be then that so someone makes edits in there, and then they click an action button, and the action button then wants to basically run some flow, evaluate the output of the flow, and then post an update back to a different control. Basically as if to say, well, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense, kind of a thing. And now I'm wondering, sort of like in the 10 minutes before, I found myself wondering, I don't know if the get form data value is perhaps related to what I'm asking, but I don't understand that step anyway. So, but does that give you the flavor of what I'm after?
Like you want to update the whole object and thus have it populate to all of the places, all of the controls?
No, it's so the flow that I want to call, it would, for example, take an account record as an input, as it were,
Right.
instead of all those individual fields.
Right.
So right in front of it, I have a create data step that, is creating, for example, an account record. But by taking, the data from form data, one piece after another, form data, one piece after another, and that's okay if I got only 3 or 4 or 5 fields.
Right.
When I start to get to a dozen, I find myself asking, is there a shortcut I'm missing? Where I could, since all of these controls are bound to a data type, and I know on the output they go into an output data type, it'd be nice if I could kind of do it as part of a active form flow prior to the output.
I don't think you can, but let's quickly poke around. I think you are stuck with this pattern in dealing with the individual properties and the set form control values steps. Let's see. Let me add an active form flow. We'll create one. And what I'll do is let me see if I can. I guess, can I get access to form? I can access form input data. Well, let's see. Let me just see if I can change that. Change an email address on that account. So I'll just create a string here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select form input data, current account, email address. I'm going to change its value to something else. I'm going to change its value here. And I'll name it Bob at decisions.com. And then I'm going to change, actually, I'm doing this backwards. What am I doing? Goodness gracious. Sorry. I'm doing this all backwards. Apologies. My brain is not clicking. I'm going to change the email address of form input data current account to Bob at decisions.com when this runs. And I'm just going to end. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going I'm going to show email address in this text box, which I do. And let me just add an event button here so I can trigger this active form flow. So let me edit this, and I'm going to select the event button as a trigger. But this needs to refresh. I don't think this is going to do anything. Let's see here. Let me put a fetch entity step here. And let me fetch accounts. Excuse me. All right, and then I'm going to add email address as my fetch criteria. Just do a constant. We'll just fetch the admin account. And we'll pass results.first into our form and run this. So there's admin. If I raise event, it runs. It probably changed that value, but it doesn't show.
And I was kind of thinking the other way around, where the user has revised it, but now I want to know if the active form flow, I mean, it can get it directly from the control, get the new value directly from the control, but I was sort of hoping there would be a way to just like ask for what would be the updated account record.
To ask for the
So at the end, when you click an outcome, right? All of the values currently in the controls, as I understand it, will be committed to some, whether it's a new entity for output or update the input entity, and then that's on your output. Kind of looks like a new one, honestly. So it's almost like I like a preview of what that output would be. As opposed to creating the preview myself.
You'd have, you'd have to do it yourself, I think. Like you could use like basically like a JSON or a text-based description of the object you're creating or editing in that situation.
Well, what I did is I had a create data step with the same entity type and then I just build data with each field taking from the individual controls.
Right.
And that's where I thought, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to streamline this? Because I already told you that each control is bound to this field and that entity type. Or maybe I'm missing something.
No, I don't think there's a shortcut to doing what you're asking about here. Yeah, I don't think.
So there was one step in the form rules area that I didn't understand, and I couldn't help wondering if, so there's a get form data value as opposed to control value. I honestly have no idea what this step does. I mean, I know that it wants a type which looked, vaguely suspicious, but I kind of got lost as to what.
Good question. Let's see if I can't find this in our helpful doc site. Form rules. Get.
They don't have a page for it.
Get form data value. Account. Name. I mean, if you look at form data, there's form input data, get form data value. And the name, it must be the input name, right? Oh, that doesn't make sense. I don't know what this step does. I don't know what this step does either.
So the value will be an account.
Presumably. Let's see here. Oh no. Wow, I just really screwed myself. Live on TV. There we go. No.
Now
So
try adding like a dot something there in your thing there in your control value, or just do something goofy.
let's see what comes out here. Get form data value. Null. I'm gonna have to figure out what this step does for you, Chris. I don't have any clue. Let me ask my wonderful doc team why we missed this.
That was my one hope for a shortcut.
I honestly, I'm confused as to what that particular step could do. I'll have to find that out for you, because I don't know.
Yeah, you can see why I'm encouraged by it, because it asks for a type, it promises you to give you that type, but then it wants an input, which I couldn't figure out quickly, and I think you're struggling with the same input.
Absolutely. I have get control value, get show control, show multiple controls, enable.
Yeah, so it's
Exit
the
form.
other get.
Yep, it's the other get. What version are you on?
8.10.
Okay, so it is fair. It could be fairly new. Yeah, I'll have to find out, but I don't think that you can like you could create, like, if you have, you can definitely, the form control steps are type yes, thank you, are type specific. So like on the form, like you can build up an object and pass it into a type, a control that has a type. So if I select account on here, then maybe email address, then data name.
Is this where like a custom control comes in? If I had a custom control that had all those fields broken out, I could use that custom control as the as sort of the input by way of a control value.
I'm not sure I follow what you're asking there exactly. What's a
So
custom control? Like a user control?
yeah, user control.
It's more, that's more about just, you could pass an account into it, but you're still building a form. It's just that if you have multiple forms where you want to show the same thing, you wouldn't have to rebuild them.
Right.
But like
But
here, you could, oh, go ahead.
so that user control, I would expect that it would have a in this case like an account as an input type.
It will,
And
yes. Yes,
so
correct.
my hope would be that if I ask for a get control value of that same control, that I would get an account record out of it.
Then yes, that's correct.
And that might be the shortcut I'm looking for, is to kind of build a form around that style of control, a user control to then be the host, as it were, instead of doing it directly.
Possibly. But you can get an account in and out.
Well, some of these data types, like the list types, the drop-down lists, the grid, the data grid, they naturally, have a list of some type. And so whatever the current selection is, or those kinds of things, you can get that rather directly, even if it's something that's edited, as with a data grid, right? And I think that would be true of the, work with me, brain, data repeater types.
Say that one more time, Chris.
So if I had a data repeater and I were to access the content of a selected data repeater row, if that data repeater was in fact, itself bound to a entity,
right, by definition, yes.
Then getting the value of that control would get me that entity too. That's what made me think, oh, I could probably do this with a user control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that should, and yes, yes, you should be able to do that. Like you can, on a user control, you would define an input object. Here's user defined, and we would create one. Oops, never mind. Picker create, create. And then here we would define input data on this thing somewhere.
Isn't that at the top now?
Yes, thank you. And so here we define an account, and it would be the account. And then we could pass its properties down. So I guess the question is, if I have this, does the set control, does the,
Will a get control value provide to me, sort of the current content of what user has been fiddling with it?
we'll say it's optional here. So that's now on our, oops, excuse me. This is now on our form, and the data name will be UC test 1. Oops, and then so here, if we come into our active form flow and edit this, and we edit, let's get rid of that. And if I use what, get form control data, or
Yeah, get control value.
get control value, and then I pass in, I find UC test, there's the user defined, and that is going to be a type of account. So it does pass an account out. So, and I guess I could set control value on that. So
well, I'm just looking for like whatever edits the user did to it. So if you were to go fiddle with that and then fire your event, will this get control value essentially represent it that way?
okay, sure, we can test that. Let me save this thing.
You got another input to specify.
So let's select first. Drop down items I don't care about. Select drop down I don't care about. Let's see. So we'll run this. There's our, look, there's Bob at decisions.com. But we've already edited that. So if I do Bob1 and I raise event, and I look at get control value, output data, nothing.
Rats.
It's not giving me anything. I'm not sure we've thought about using form controls for user controls here at all. Not that we shouldn't have. Interesting. Form session info, form rule ID. Yeah, I don't think we can get this for you. I think you're gonna have to deal with these property by property today in the active form flows.
Well, that answers the question then.
Yep. Okay, sorry about, yeah, unless I'm just missing something, I don't think that there's a way for us to do that. I mean, technically, but like you already know, like if someone's typed in a change, you get that, and you can trigger the active form flow to run.
Mm-hmm.
But you need it in the active form flow itself, not on the output of the form step.
Well, so this is something I'm kind of wrestling with my user community. I'm trying to encourage the larger world around me to understand that decisions works best in like a wizard style. So for example, give me criteria, exit the form, let me show you the result, right? And then deal with your result, don't like it, we'll exit that form, go back to criteria, see what I mean? That very naturally does exactly what you're saying, where I'd have my output and I can deal with that as an entity, during the flow sequence. I have a user community who want me to build essentially a flat client experience using the decisions machinery, which is a bit of a mismatch to my mind. And this is, one of those examples of what that mismatch looks like.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what to offer here besides the hard path of just dealing with everything is individual properties.
All right. Well, thanks for the second review, though.
You bet, man. Happy to help. Or happy to attempt to help.
Hmm.
All right, we've got another question from somebody who's not in here, who's asking about blockchain stuff. We don't do anything with blockchain today, but I'll actually read the question. What's our Web 3.0 strategy? William Green, what is the Decisions currently doing in a blockchain space with smart contracts and asset tokenization? And nothing. We don't have any relation to blockchain tech, or we're not, or even have any blockchain stuff on the roadmap today, for better or worse. All right. What other questions do we have today? All right. And Alex, go ahead, sir. What you got?
Hey, Will, I have an easy one. If no one else has any questions.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just, going from the 6.18 world to the 8.6 world, and haven't really any kind of clue how the active form flow stuff works.
Okay.
So, for example, in bygone times, like if I wanted to, like I have a radio button control, which decides whether I'm going to display a drop-down list or a text box. Both of these things inside of a horizontal stack. And in the olden days, I would use visibility rules. One to to show one and one to show the other kind of thing. So that there would only be one control appearing at any given time within the horizontal stack. But
Okay.
My understanding is that it's easier to do this thing now in 8.6 using active form flows, because right now, like these, after post migration, they show up in a section called legacy.
Yeah. In some ways it's easier. The biggest thing it makes easier is that you're not everything you can see all of the like the logic run together instead of trying to piece together the behavior, the linking of multiple steps or multiple sort of rules on the form. So yes, like in the example you're asking about in the active form flow, you would specify, hide or show steps. So you would hide a control or show a control respectively in your active form flow. So behavior, the sort of outcome with there's no functional change in terms of its ability to do work on the form for you. It's just a different pattern. Instead of using data flows for some things and then validation and visibility rules for other things, it's just it's using the flow design pattern for all things. And there should be functional equivalence between them. And I think it's easier, especially when you get a more complicated form with lots of hiding and showing, to figure out, when something's not behaving correctly, to figure out why that's the case. So from a debugging perspective, it's much easier to use.
Okay, cool.
There's no like, we wanted to start getting people to use them without restricting their ability to edit what they had or even add to the approach that they had before.
Right.
I mean, we should assume on some very long timeline we would be depreciating the legacy pieces, but that's not on any roadmap. That's in the next handful of years. But it is the new preferred pattern to be using.
Okay, so basically you're saying that within the same active form flow, you can affect multiple controls.
Yeah, exactly. And you could have one gigantic, there's no reason you couldn't have a huge active form flow that manages all of the different form interactions in one place instead of having them spread all over.
Gotcha.
So you could update data, refresh data, hide and show data, apply and clear validations, all of those in one form.
Okay, cool.
All right. All right, and then, all right, Murray, what do you have for us today?
So I am working with a case that has multiple levels of nested data structures. So
Okay.
from my case, and I sent this in writing, but I guess I didn't send it in time. So from my case, I want to start, the case is, let's say, a client, a person.
Mhm.
And then this person can open multiple accounts. So
Okay.
I have a spot there where I've got a data repeater that allows them to list out the accounts they're going to open.
Okay.
And then after that, I run a flow, or multiple flows that basically take account information and write them into the correct nested data structures.
Okay.
I would like to create some kind of a counter or some kind of a serial, well, basically a counter of those accounts. So in my data repeater, if you fill in one account and you call it, why? I don't want you to name it at that point. I want you to pick a type, tell me how much money's in it, and then I would create a serial thing that links it back to the case. So
Okay.
Pedersen 1, Pedersen 2, Pedersen 3. But I
Okay.
don't want the person to have to pick 1, 2, and 3. I just want it to happen magically when they hit add data. It should append that new designation.
Okay.
So what is the easiest way for me to do that?
So you've got like a custom, are you using like a sub dialog button? Like you're using a custom add to data
No.
repeater function?
No, just regular add data, remove data.
I see. Then you are, you could use we were talking about this with someone recently. I mean, technically the data repeater is a collection.
Yes.
And so, but the thing doesn't have its index.
And I need
Right.
it to have an index so later on I can get data that comes back from an e-signature vendor and feed it into the correct account.
Well, when it comes out of the form, it will have an index because it's just a collection at that point, right? But each item doesn't have its own index.
I'm writing each item into a temporary data structure. I don't know if that matters or not.
You're doing where you're not doing that with the add remove button, right? You're doing that somewhere else.
It as part of the repeater.
As part of the repeater.
Mhm.
The thing, the repeater item itself doesn't know its current index at all. Like it doesn't know its position in the collection. If you were using a custom, like a design where you had like a sub dialog button driven, like add repeater action, you could append, you could update the data that way. I think we've got some good example labs for that.
And that's perfectly fine. If you can point me to the documentation, I will take a look and see if that answers my question. I just didn't know how to phrase it.
Using sub dialog. Let's just see, sub dialog. Do we have a show using sub dialog on a data repeater? Updating data grid. This is probably with an actual regular data grid, but applies the same for a data repeater. The data grid output is typeset all. Yeah, selected row. The form shows the current department. This one might make sense. Updating data grid data using sub dialog flow. Someone just built one of these too. Runtime selection using a sub dialog. Items on the main form. This is probably a sub dialog on the repeater control itself, right? Yeah, that's on the actual repeater. So I think maybe that one I just shared here. Oops, let me see if I can get back to it. No. Using data grid, updating data grid using sub dialog flow. This one should give you some, I think, steps on how to do this. ultimately you avoid the use of the add button, and you
Okay.
start and then you would build a custom flow, like a custom sub dialog flow with a custom form on it. But what that does is that flow could take in the whole collection, and you could figure out how many items are in that collection. And then you could, do +1 for account name as you when the user clicks submit, when it's and refreshes the data repeater. You
Okay.
could get it to identify it's the collection count and or where, where it's going to be located at.
Okay. I can take a look at that and see if how close that gets me, and then I'll
Mhm.
ask a different, put in a ticket or ask a different question if I can't quite get
Yeah,
there.
this looks like this example shows you how to select a row and edit it, which isn't exactly what we want, but might be helpful too. You might get that requirement coming at some point as well.
Okay.
Where because it can be difficult to show a lot of text or a really detailed view on the data repeater. And so you might be able to select one and then say, edit, at which point you get a pop-up form where you can then see all the data for that particular item and edit it in a larger form view. This one's not your ask, I don't think, is exactly that. It's to replace the add button with a sub dialog flow. It's itself, so that you click add and it shows you the add new account form. You fill out all the details and click add, at which point it refreshes the data repeater with your new item added at the end, or even possibly at the appropriate location in the data grid.
Okay.
That second of those two is what you're after, right?
Think so. I really just want them kind of identified. I want to be able to further down the line know that there were 3 accounts entered and which one was number 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can then say, when you get information back from the signature package, put
Mm-hmm.
this piece of information into account 1, put this piece of information into account 2. And
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you definitely, like, so on your type, you'd have a property called like account number or account sequence or something.
Right.
And every time in the sub dialog flow, you add a new one, you get the current collection count, right? 2,
Mhm.
3, or 4, add 1 to it, update that property called account sequence number to be, from 3 to 4, using that count plus that, plus an add step, and then update that. And then you would have the ability to say, this is account 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth.
Okay.
You just need to get the data repeater collection count in
And
the
when I
sub
use
dialog flow.
count, I'm assuming I don't just have to use 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If I want to say, like I said, call it, preface them all with Pedersen dash,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then tack on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, for sure. It's just
Okay.
a property you can interact with at that point.
Gotcha.
So you'd have a thing called sequence description or something, right?
Yes.
And then you'd understand the current collection count. You'd add 1 to it, and then you would take the the account last name and do like a text merge plus with a plus, by adding another number to it.
Yes.
And that'd give you something like I think that'd give you something like what you're asking about.
I think so. So someone put in the chat a dictionary key value.
Yeah, I'll let Vitaly come off mute. I don't know what he's offering there. Assuming he wants to.
Because I don't know what that is.
Yeah, same here. I'm not sure what in particular he's offering. But ultimately, if you get the collection count, you can then custom add a custom update a property on your data type that's in the data repeater, to be to increment the count number and append it to whatever custom string you want. I think that gives you what you're asking for.
I think it sounds like it does. Yes.
Okay.
So I will take a look at this document and see where that gets me.
Okay, wonderful.
All right. Thank you.
Alex, do you still have a question? I see your hands up. I'm not sure if you have another question, sir. If so, please feel free to come off mute and ask.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to have my hand up.
No, no worries.
Just a keener.
Yeah. Has anyone started using the have you started seeing the whatever the auto-generated hand signals in Zoom? You can it's like a feature you can enable where you put your thumb up and it will do a thumb up for you. It's pretty ridiculous, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I don't see anything like that.
Yeah, Chris, that's what I'm talking about. Like it will here. It's ridiculous. Like here, I'll start my video. See if you put your thumb up. Oh, maybe this one's not doing it because it's a webinar. On my regular Zoom, like if you put your thumb up, you'll get this, it'll tell you calculating and then it'll do like a thumb up emoji, or you could do like wave or hand up and all these other things. It's really, look at me shilling for Zoom's silly new feature set. Okay, now that I guess since we are actually, yeah, no, it actually exists. Sooner or later, it'll read our facial expressions and alert our superiors when we don't agree with the things that they're telling us. That's a feature I don't look forward to. All right, I think since we're actually talking about Zoom features now, that's a clear sign to stop for the day. All right, thanks everybody. We will see you same time tomorrow. Appreciate all the questions.
Okay, thanks, Will. Cheers.
You bet. See you guys.